Hello, welcome to this week's sketchbook tour. This week it's an old sketchbook, my landscape and tree sketchbook from around 2018, I think. Might be 2019. I'm not very good at dating my sketchbooks. It's something I should really do. But anyway, it was around a time that I was mostly drawing characters, like portraits and figures from imagination. I never really used to use references, and this was my first real attempt at trying to get a little bit better and try my hand at something else other than figures, characters, faces, and all of that sort of thing. So let's get into it. So I'm sure I'd probably drawn buildings and trees a little bit beforehand, but it was certainly something that I hadn't drawn much and didn't really feel that comfortable about, not very confident. And as you can see, my values, my rendering, my grasp on perspective was all a little bit all over the place, but I suppose that's the point of having a sketchbook. It's to try these things, hopefully get a little bit better, experiment, have fun. And I remember this being a really enjoyable sketchbook to practice in. And it was definitely solely themed around landscapes, trees, flora. There's some interiors as well. And again, like I say, things that I wasn't overly confident with drawing. And there was some experimentation with different pens. I'd recently bought some markers and some Tipex whiteout and other white gel pens, most of which I didn't use much during this because, as you can see, some of it bled through or I didn't like the effect. I was also using a pencil underdrawing at this point. I don't know if it'll pick it up on my phone camera, but there's some blue marks. Because I wasn't overly confident drawing from a reference, it gave me a little bit of a buffer, I suppose. And most of these images are from references or from places near me, photos that I'd taken myself, or I'd actually gone out and drawn these things. But as the book goes on, there are a few more sort of Google image search type things to get some variety. Trying to take some inspiration from interiors as well as exterior details such as gates and of course buildings and stuff. But it was very much a transition, let's say, in trying not to be too detailed. Or that's what I learned from doing this book, is that you don't have to add every single brick. The implication of things can be a lot more interesting. And yeah, with rendering, I hadn't learnt some of the techniques I use now. It was, again, it's a study book, so these aren't meant to be perfect by any stretch. This was me trying to teach myself through practice, through actually doing these things. And it's not a bad thing to have random marks and to experiment and things. It gives things like these drawings character. So I don't necessarily see any of these drawings as being bad. They're just like I say, a transitional sort of thing. So I think at this point then I start using images from Pinterest and Google. to get some variation on different types of housing or structures, as well as different trees and plants and mushrooms and fungi and all of that sort of stuff. This is sort of a local, this is Sheffield. Not all of it, obviously, but yeah. And then back to the Google searches or whatever it was. And slowly getting a grasp of perspective, I think. Or, you know, things like perspective, rendering, line weight, it's all come very instinctual to me through the act of doing it. And looking at other artists and how they do it, as well as experimenting with photography and things that are actually in front of me. These are from a reference photo, but they feel a lot more imaginative, I suppose. Try my hand at you know, smaller marks. So another interior. There's not many of those in this book, I don't think. This big gnarled tree, I think it was again something I found online. It was quite fun to draw, and I didn't do it justice, I don't think, but it was still fun. These very busy scenes. I think if I was to do it now, I'd just focus in on smaller details and leave a lot of it quite bare, I suppose, to highlight the details that I would add into it. But it was definitely, again, a process of practice and study. Some mushrooms and another gnarled tree. I think this was meant to be water, but again, I was having difficulty. It was very horizontal or vertical, my lines at that point. I hadn't really learned to follow the contour of things, I suppose. More of a nighttime scene. Again, if I was to do that now, I'd probably make the sky black and keep these white. But again, it's a sketchbook. It's meant to be something that you try these things out with, isn't it? So, and I learned a lot from doing this particular book. I like I say, it was probably one of my most enjoyable sketchbooks. And it was the first time I'd really dedicated a book to trying to get better at a specific subject, and it's something that I've sort of carried on to this day. I remember being quite happy with this one, again because I'd learned not to put all the detail in. And then things that are carried on to things like this, because I'm sure there probably would have been a sky with clouds, but it seemed more effective to leave that stuff out. I was also only using one type of pen, and I think typically I do that now, but I would try and vary the line weight. I would thicken things up and keep certain things thin. That one seems to work out pretty well, although there's again issues with the perspective, but I remember being really happy with this until I then added these big thick lines. But, you know, I learned a lot from doing that, making that mistake. It's the best way to learn. Or it's the way that I seem to learn the best. It's the most effective way for me. Again, more images from online, I think. I'm back to some of my own images. I think that's the seaside. That's a dam near me. I've always loved drawing trees, or I've since this sketchbook I've then gone on to love drawing trees. Like I say, I hadn't really drawn many up until then. And I always find them to be quite tricky. You know, they're these big, detailed, intricate 3D shapes. And I've definitely simplified things since this book, but I don't feel like I've ever truly captured a likeness as I might have wanted to. So that idea of keeping certain things sort of devoid of detail while adding lots of detail elsewhere, that's an example of that. That's something that I'd learned through doing this book. Like a stylistic choice more than anything. Because I've always preferred things a little bit more graphic, I suppose, or a little bit more thoughtful in that sense, not necessarily going for realistic, but finding sort of like a midpoint. And again, like with this one, or this even, like knowing where to concentrate those values. See, I sort of dropped the ball on this one because it's kind of all over the place. Getting close to the end. So again, I think these are all my own images. Oh, and that's it. So yeah, always a sketchbook that I look back fondly on, and it definitely influenced the way that I approach drawing and study, for that matter. So yeah, that's it, I suppose. There's nothing else to particularly say. Hopefully I'll have something a bit newer for next week's book. It's been a bit of a slow week in terms of sketchbooks and studies. There's a lot of things planned. I've got some resources coming for artists that can, you know, hopefully you can study along with me or at your own pace. Lots of things come into my Patreon, lots of things come into my Redbubble and T-Mill and all of those sort of POD places. And yeah, also my comic is back up and running again, so hopefully there'll be more details on that. I plan to do more character-based and environmental work in regards to Scrambled Eggs, my comic. So that will be coming up next week, and you know, for the rest of the month, hopefully, or next month, as it's pretty much the end of the month now, isn't it? Anyway, I'm rambling on. If you got to the end, thank you very much, and I'll see you next week, and be kind to yourself. Bye.